My daughter sold my antique collection to pay for her wedding, but the buyer was me. Hi everyone! Before we get into today's video, I need your help. We've noticed that the channel's reach has been dropping a bit, and one of the best ways you can support us is by subscribing. It's quick, free, and helps us keep bringing you new and interesting stories. Your support means the world to us, and together, we can grow this channel. Thank you so much. Now let's get to today's story. I'm writing from a temporary account for obvious reasons, and I've changed some details to protect my anonymity. They say a mother's love is unconditional. They say it's endless, boundless, infinite. They say it can forgive anything. I used to believe that. I built my entire life on that belief. Now I know better. My name is Eleanor, and I spent 37 years raising a daughter who would one day look me in the eye and steal my soul. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me start where all good stories begin. At the beginning, when I still believed in fairy tales and happy endings. I was 23 when Vivian was born. Her father, my late husband Marcus, held her in the hospital room with tears streaming down his face, and I remember thinking, this is it. This is what I was made for. Not the career I'd been building, not the dreams I'd been chasing, but this tiny, perfect creature who smelled like hope and felt like forever. Marcus died when Vivian was 7. A heart attack, sudden and cruel, the kind that doesn't give you time to say goodbye. I was 30 then, a widow with a child and a mortgage, and a future that had just imploded. I could have crumbled. God knows I wanted to, but I had Vivian, and Vivian needed me, so I did what women have done since the beginning of time. I survived. I took the insurance money Marcus left us, and I was careful with it. So careful. I invested some, saved some, and used a small portion to start something that would become my lifeline over the decades to come. My antique collection. It started with Marcus's pocket watch, a gold Hamilton from 1920, the one his grandfather had carried through the Depression. I couldn't sell it, couldn't bear to. So I kept it, and I started to understand something profound. Objects carry memory. They hold the weight of the hands that touched them, the lives that were lived around them. They're not just things, they're witnesses. I became a collector, not of value, but of stories. Over the years, piece by piece, I built something extraordinary. A Tiffany lamp that had belonged to my grandmother, who'd saved for 2 years to buy it during the Jazz Age. A set of Victorian mourning jewelry, delicate and haunting, that I found at an estate sale in Connecticut. A writing desk from the 1840s, where someone had carved their initials inside a drawer. E.M. Poisse, T.R. 1847. I used to imagine their story. Were they married? Did they grow old together? Or was it a love that never came to be? Each piece was a thread connecting me to something larger than my own small life. They reminded me that I was part of a continuum, that my grief and struggle and survival were part of the human story that stretched backward and forward through time. And I shared all of this with Vivian. When she was young, she loved the collection as much as I did. She'd curl up on my lap while I told her the stories behind each piece. She'd trace the engravings on the silver tea service with her small fingers. She'd ask me to wind up the antique music box so she could watch the tiny ballerina spin. Someday, I'd tell her, all of this will be yours. She'd smile and nod, and I'd think, I'm doing it right. I'm giving her roots and wings. I'm teaching her to value history, to honor what came before. I was so naive. The distance between us didn't happen overnight. It was gradual, like erosion. You don't notice the cliff crumbling until suddenly there's a chasm where solid ground used to be. It started in her teenage years. The usual rebellion, I thought. She wanted designer clothes, not vintage dresses. She wanted a new car, not the reliable Honda I'd bought used. She wanted to go to an expensive private college, not the excellent state school that would leave her debt-free. I gave her what I could. I took extra shifts at the consulting firm where I worked. I sold some of the less precious antiques to pay for her tuition. I co-signed loans when the scholarships weren't enough. She went to Stanford. She studied art history, ironically enough. I thought maybe she'd come to appreciate what I'd been trying to teach her all along. Instead, she came home from college with a contempt for the past that felt personal. "You're so stuck in yesterday, Mom," she'd say. "You need to live in the now." But I was living in the now. I was paying her student loans in the now. I was covering her rent when her first job out of college didn't pay enough in the now. I was wiring her money for emergencies that seemed to happen every other month in the now. And through it all, I kept collecting. I kept building my museum of memory. It was the one thing that was mine, that I didn't have to justify or explain or apologize for. The collection had grown valuable over the years. I'd been careful, buying quality pieces when I could afford them, learning to spot authenticity, building relationships with reputable dealers. What had started as a grieving widow's hobby had become a serious collection worth well into 6 figures. I never told Vivian the exact value. I didn't want her to see dollar signs when she looked at her inheritance. I wanted her to see history, connection, love. Another mistake. 2 years ago, Vivian met Derek. I knew from the first moment I met him that he was wrong for her. Not because he was a bad person, necessarily. He was handsome enough, successful enough, charming enough. But there was something hollow in his smile, something calculating in the way he'd touch Vivian's back or shoulder, as if marking territory. He worked in finance. He wore suits that cost more than my monthly mortgage. He drove a Tesla and talked about disruption and optimization like they were religious concepts. And he looked at my home, my life, my carefully curated collection, like it was all just clutter in need of clearing. "You could get a fortune for this stuff," he said the first time he came to dinner, gesturing vaguely at my china cabinet. "Vintage is having a real moment right now. You should capitalize on that." Capitalize. As if my grandmother's wedding china was a stock option. Vivian laughed, but there was a new note in her voice. Agreement. "Mom is never going to sell anything, Derek. She's too sentimental." The way she said sentimental made it sound like a disease. I bit my tongue. I smiled. I served the roast chicken I'd made and pretended not to notice the looks they exchanged, the private language of a couple who've already decided you're the problem. 6 months later, they got engaged. Vivian called me, screaming with joy, and I cried, because that's what mothers do. We cry when our daughters are happy, even when we have a sinking feeling in our gut that this happiness is built on sand. "We're thinking a June wedding," she gushed, "at the Belmont estate. Derek's parents know the owners. It's going to be like a fairy tale, Mom." The Belmont estate. I'd been there once for a charity event. It was the kind of place where you needed to take out a second mortgage just to book the venue. "That sounds beautiful, sweetheart," I said carefully. "Do you have a budget in mind?" "Oh, Derek's parents are helping, and you'll help too, right, Mom? You always do." There it was. The casual assumption that my wallet was as open as my heart. "Of course I'll help," I said, because that's what I always said. "Let's sit down and figure out what makes sense." We never had that conversation. Instead, Vivian and Derek planned their fairy tale, and the numbers kept climbing. 50,000, 75, 120. When I gently suggested they might want to scale back, Vivian looked at me like I'd suggested she get married in a parking lot. "This is my one wedding, Mom. My one day. Derek's parents are paying for most of it. I just need you to cover your half." Your half. As if I'd agreed to a business partnership. "Vivian, I don't have $60,000 lying around." "But you have all that stuff," she said, and there was something new in her eyes, something that made my blood run cold. "All those antiques. You could sell a few pieces. You don't even use half of them." "Those aren't for selling, Vivian. Those are your precious collection, I know." She rolled her eyes. "But what's the point of having valuable things if you won't use them when your own daughter needs help?" I wanted to explain that they were being used, that they brought me joy every single day, that they were my connection to my history, to Marcus, to the generations that came before. But I could see in her face that she wouldn't understand. To her, They were just old things gathering dust, resources being wasted on nostalgia. "I'll figure something out," I said finally, "but I need you to understand that I can't liquidate my entire collection for a wedding." She hugged me then, and I felt her relax against me. "I knew you'd come through, Mom. You always do." I took out a loan against my 401k. $25,000. It was stupid, financially speaking. I'd pay penalties and taxes and interest, but it was better than selling my soul. I gave Vivian the check 3 months before the wedding. She barely looked at it, just folded it and put it in her purse. "Thanks, Mom." "This helps, but we're still short about 40,000. My heart sank. "Vivian, I can't." I know, your precious antiques." She waved her hand dismissively. "Don't worry, Derek and I will figure it out." I should have known something was wrong. The way she said it was too casual, too breezy, like she'd already figured it out and was just waiting for the right moment to tell me. But I was exhausted. Exhausted from working extra hours to make up for the 401k loan. Exhausted from the guilt I felt for not being able to give my daughter everything she wanted. Exhausted from pretending that everything was fine when I could feel the ground shifting beneath my feet. So I let it go. I came home from a 3-day business trip on a Tuesday afternoon in April. The azaleas in my front yard were blooming, pink and white and beautiful. The sun was shining. It was the kind of day that makes you believe everything will be okay. I opened my front door and knew immediately that something was wrong. The air felt different. Empty. The quality of silence had changed. I walked into the living room and my legs went weak. The display cabinet was empty. The Tiffany lamp was gone. The writing desk, the Victorian chairs, the morning jewelry, the silver tea service, the music box, the pocket watch, the first edition books, the oil paintings, the Persian rugs. Gone. All of it. Gone. The room looked like a corpse, like something vital had been removed, leaving only the shell behind. I couldn't breathe, couldn't think. My hands were shaking so badly, I had to sit down on the floor because my legs wouldn't hold me. I must have sat there for 10 minutes, 20, an hour. Time stopped meaning anything. My brain couldn't process what I was seeing. It kept trying to make sense of it. A robbery. It had to be a robbery. I needed to call the police. But nothing else was touched. The TV was still there, my laptop on the kitchen counter, my jewelry box upstairs. Only the antiques were gone. Only the things I loved most in the world. I heard the front door open, and I looked up to see Vivian walking in, humming something under her breath. She had shopping bags in her hands, expensive ones. She saw me on the floor, and her face went through a series of expressions. Surprise, guilt, defiance, and finally something that looked almost like relief. "Oh," she said, "you're home early." I couldn't speak. I just stared at her. "Mom, before you freak out, let me explain." "Where are my things, Vivian?" My voice didn't sound like my own. It was flat, dead. She set down her shopping bags carefully. "I sold them." 3 words, simple, declarative. Like she'd just told me she'd returned a library book. "You sold them." "I had to, Mom. We needed the money for the wedding. You said you couldn't help anymore, and Derek's parents were getting frustrated with how much we kept asking from them, and I just—" She gestured around the empty room. "You weren't using them anyway. They were just sitting here." I felt something crack inside my chest. It was almost physical, like a bone breaking. "Those weren't yours to sell." "Well, technically they were going to be mine eventually, right? You always said everything would be mine someday. I just took my inheritance a little early." She had the audacity to smile. A nervous, pleading smile. "Come on, Mom, don't be mad. I got a really good price for them. The dealer was impressed with the collection, said you had excellent taste." "How much?" I whispered. "Almost 40,000. Isn't that great? Now we can have the fairy tale wedding we wanted, and it's all thanks to you." She came toward me, arms outstretched for a hug. "You've always been so generous, Mom. This is just one more way you're making my dreams come true." I stood up, and something in my face made her stop walking. "Get out. I said quietly. Mom, get out of my house. You're being dramatic. They were just old things. They were my life. The scream tore out of me, raw and primal. They were your father's watch, your great-grandmother's lamp. They were mine, Vivian. Mine, not yours. You had no right. She stepped back, and I saw fear flicker across her face. Good. She should be afraid. I'll pay you back, she said quickly. After the wedding, Derek and I will get out before I call the police and have you arrested for theft. You wouldn't. I pulled out my phone. She grabbed her shopping bags and ran. I didn't call the police. What would be the point? The items were gone, sold to God knows whom, scattered to the winds. The legal battle would cost more than I'd ever recover. And she was my daughter. No matter what she'd done, she was still my daughter. That's what I told myself that night, sitting alone in my violated home, surrounded by empty spaces that used to hold my heart. But underneath the grief and shock, something else was growing. Something cold and sharp and calculating. I called my most trusted antique dealer the next morning. Charles had been helping me build my collection for 15 years. He knew every piece, knew where I'd bought them, knew their provenance and value. Charles, I said when he answered, I need your help. I told him what had happened. There was a long silence on the other end of the line. Eleanor, he said finally, and his voice was tight with anger. That's unconscionable. Who did she sell to? I don't know. She wouldn't tell me, but I need you to find out. Can you ask around? Someone in the community must have seen those pieces come on the market. I'll make some calls. Items of that quality don't move quietly. Give me a day. He called me back in 4 hours. I found them, he said. Or rather, I found out who bought them. Eleanor, this is going to sound strange, but the buyer was anonymous, cash transaction. The dealer she sold to is a bit of a bottom feeder, someone we avoid in the reputable circles. He doesn't ask questions, but he mentioned that the buyer seemed to know exactly what they were getting. Paid immediately, no negotiation. My heart was pounding. Do you know where the items are now? Another pause. That's the strange part. They're in a secure storage facility downtown, the one we use for high-value collections. Eleanor, I think you should come down here. There's something I need to show you. I met him at his gallery an hour later. He led me to his office and pulled out a file. This came across my desk 3 months ago, he said, sliding it toward me. A standing offer to purchase any items from a very specific list. The buyer was willing to pay premium prices, well above market value. They were clearly trying to secure these items before they hit the open market. I opened the file and my hands went numb. It was a list of my collection, every single item, detailed descriptions, photographs, estimated values. Who submitted this? I whispered. Charles pointed to a signature at the bottom of the page. My signature. But I'd never seen this document before in my life. Charles, I didn't. I know you didn't, he said gently, because I submitted it. I stared at him. 3 months ago, you came to me upset about your daughter's pressure to sell. You said you were worried she might do something drastic. You asked me, hypothetically, if there was a way to protect your collection if someone tried to sell it without your permission. Do you remember? I did. Vaguely. It had been a panicked, rambling conversation over coffee. I'd been so stressed about the wedding finances, about Vivian's demands. I told you I'd handle it, Charles continued. I put out feelers. I created a buyer persona, essentially. Someone who would swoop in and purchase your items immediately if they ever came on the market. I notified every dealer I knew to call me if they saw any of your pieces. And when that bottom feeder called me 2 weeks ago, saying he had a young woman trying to offload a significant antique collection, he smiled. I activated the buyer. Who? I asked, though somewhere deep down I already knew. You did, Eleanor, or rather, a trust I set up in your name, anonymous, untraceable to you personally. When your daughter sold your collection, you bought it back. The room spun. How much? $42,000. The dealer took a percentage, of course. Your daughter got about 38,000, which I believe she told you was 40. His smile turned sharp. She lied about that too. I sank into a chair. So I paid $42,000 for my own things. You paid to save them, Charles corrected. And Eleanor, you need to know something else. I had the collection properly appraised while it's been in storage. Your instincts over the years were exceptional. The actual market value of what you owned? He slid another paper across the desk. Conservative estimate, $475,000. Likely closer to $600 at auction. The number didn't compute. I read it again. $475,000. She sold $500,000 worth of antiques for $38,000, I said slowly. She got robbed, Charles said bluntly. That dealer saw a naive, desperate young woman and took advantage. He probably sold her a story about giving her the best price he could. In reality, he got the deal of his lifetime. He would have turned around and sold those items for 10 times what he paid her. But you stopped him. I stopped him. I started laughing. I couldn't help it. It bubbled up from somewhere deep, slightly hysterical, but also genuinely amused. My daughter had tried to steal my most precious possessions to fund her fairy tale wedding, and in the end, she'd gotten a fraction of their worth while I'd bought them back without her ever knowing. So what happens now? I asked when I could speak again. Charles leaned back in his chair. That's entirely up to you. The items are in your name, in secure storage. You can retrieve them whenever you want. Your daughter has no idea the buyer was you. She thinks they're gone forever, scattered to private collections across the country. And the money she got? Presumably went to the wedding. The wedding. In 6 weeks, my daughter was going to walk down an aisle paid for with money she'd stolen from me, money she'd gotten by betraying me in the most fundamental way possible. She thought she'd gotten away with it. She thought I'd forgiven her, or at least resigned myself to it. She had no idea what was coming. I didn't confront her immediately. I needed time to think, to process, to plan. For 2 weeks, I avoided her calls. When she finally showed up at my house, looking worried and a little annoyed, I let her in and made tea like nothing was wrong. "Mom, you've been so distant," she said, sitting at my kitchen table. "Are you still mad about the antiques? Because I really think you're overreacting. It's not like they were family heirlooms or anything truly important." I smiled blandly. "Not family heirlooms. Just your father's watch. Just your great-grandmother's lamp. Just the desk where I wrote you letters every year on your birthday. Nothing important." She had the grace to look uncomfortable. "Okay, yes, I know some of them were sentimental. But Mom, marriages are about compromise and sacrifice. You've always taught me that. You sacrificed for Dad, for me. This is just another sacrifice." "Sacrifice," I repeated. "That's an interesting word choice. Usually, sacrifice is voluntary." "You're still mad." She sighed dramatically. "Look, I said I'm sorry." "What more do you want?" What did I want? That was the question, wasn't it? I wanted my daughter back. The little girl who'd loved my stories and traced the engravings with her small fingers and promised to take care of everything I'd built. But that girl was gone. Maybe she'd never really existed. Maybe I'd just been projecting my own dreams onto a child who'd grown into someone I didn't recognize. "I want you to be happy," I said finally, and I meant it. Sort of. I wanted her to be happy, but I also wanted her to understand the weight of what she'd done, and I was beginning to formulate a plan for how to make that happen. "I am happy," she said, brightening. "The wedding is going to be perfect, Mom. You're still coming, right? You'll still walk me down the aisle? Walk her down the aisle, give her away, smile and cry, and pretend that everything was fine." "Of course," I said. "I wouldn't miss it for the world." The week before the wedding, I called a family meeting. Vivian was confused when I told her. "A family meeting? Mom, I'm so busy with last-minute details." "It's important," I said. "I need to discuss some estate planning issues. With you, with Derek, with his parents. It affects everyone." That got her attention. Estate planning meant inheritance, money. things she cared about. The meeting was held at my house. Vivian and Derek arrived with his parents, Richard and Susan. They were nice enough people, if a bit pompous. Richard owned a chain of car dealerships. Susan did charity work and played tennis. They'd made it clear they considered their son's marriage to Vivian a step down, though they were too polite to say it directly. Everyone settled into my living room, which still looked bare without my collection. No one commented on it. Either Vivian hadn't told Derek's parents what she'd done, or they didn't care. "Thank you all for coming," I began. "I know this is a busy time, with the wedding this weekend. But I wanted to discuss something important before we all take this next step together." "Of course, Eleanor," Richard said jovially. "Always smart to get your affairs in order." I smiled. "Exactly. Derek, Vivian, as you know, I've been planning to help you two get started in your married life. I'd discussed with Vivian potentially helping with a down payment on a house, contributing to your future." Vivian nodded eagerly. Derek squeezed her hand. "However," I continued, "recent events have made me reconsider my plans." The temperature in the room dropped about 10 degrees. "Mom!" Vivian started. I held up my hand. "Let me finish. Richard, Susan, I don't know if Vivian told you this, but a few weeks ago, she entered my home while I was away and sold my entire antique collection without my knowledge or permission, items worth hundreds of thousands of dollars. She sold them for a fraction of their value to pay for your wedding." The silence was deafening. Susan's eyes went wide. Richard's jaw tightened. Derek looked at Vivian in shock. "You told me your mom gave you those things," Derek said quietly. "You said she'd agreed to help." "She did agree." Vivian's voice was rising, panicky. "She said she'd help with the wedding." "I gave you $25,000, I said calmly, "which you accepted, and then you stole from me." "I didn't steal. You said those things would be mine someday." "After I died, Vivian. After I died. Not before. Not whenever you decided you wanted them." Richard cleared his throat. "Eleanor, I'm horrified. We had no idea. If we'd known—" "You would have what?" I asked. "Stopped the wedding? Insisted she return the items? Or would you have rationalized it, the way Vivian has, as a daughter simply taking her inheritance a little early?" No one answered. I pulled out a folder. "I've had my will updated. I'm leaving the bulk of my estate to charity. Vivian will receive a token amount, enough to ensure she can't contest it, but nothing more. The house, the savings, everything else goes to organizations that preserve historical artifacts and support the arts." "Mom, you can't." "I can. I did. It's done." I turned to Derek. "I'm sorry you're caught in the middle of this. You seem like a decent man. But you're marrying someone who thinks love means taking whatever you want without asking. I hope you understand what you're signing up for." Derek's face was red. He looked at Vivian like he was seeing her for the first time. "Vivian, you told me your mom was old-fashioned but supportive. You told me she'd come around. You said—" He stopped. "You lied about a lot of things, didn't you?" "Derek, please." He stood up. "I need some air." He left. Susan followed him quickly, shooting Vivian a look that could have curdled milk. Richard hesitated, then nodded at me. "Eleanor, I'm truly sorry. We'll talk to Derek, sort things out." Then they were gone, and it was just me and Vivian. She was crying. Angry tears, not sad ones. "You just ruined my wedding." "No, sweetheart. You did that yourself." "I needed that money." "You needed a fairy tale wedding more than you needed a relationship with your mother?" I asked. "That's what you're telling me? You don't understand. You've never understood. You're so caught up in the past, in dead people's things, that you can't see what's right in front of you. I'm your daughter. I should be more important than some stupid antiques." "You are more important," I said, and my voice broke. "You've always been more important. But you didn't just take things, Vivian. You took my trust. You took my history. You took the one thing I'd built for myself after your father died, and you treated it like garbage. Like it meant nothing. Like I meant nothing. I never said you meant nothing. But you treated me like I did. I stood up, suddenly exhausted. I think you should go. Where am I supposed to go? The wedding is in 3 days. That's not my problem anymore. She stared at me, and I saw the exact moment she realized I was serious. That I wasn't going to fold, wasn't going to forgive, wasn't going to save her one more time. You're a bitter old woman, she said viciously. No wonder Dad died. He probably couldn't stand being married to someone so cold. It was meant to wound, and it did, but not the way she expected. Because in that moment, hearing her weaponize my dead husband against me, I felt the last thread of obligation snap. Get out, I said. And Vivian, don't come back. The wedding happened. I heard about it from Charles, who heard about it from someone who heard about it from someone else. The gossip mill in our community is efficient. Apparently Derek didn't call it off. His parents convinced him that every couple has problems, that stress brings out the worst in people, that Vivian was young and made a mistake. They scaled down the wedding significantly, moved it from the Belmont estate to a hotel ballroom, cut the guest list, eliminated the expensive flowers and the string quartet and the designer dress alterations. It was still lovely, I'm sure. Just not the fairy tale Vivian had envisioned. I didn't go. I sent a card, no gift, just a card that said, wishing you wisdom in your marriage. I heard she cried when she read it. 3 months after the wedding, I got my collection back from storage. Charles helped me move everything, piece by piece, back to where it belonged. The Tiffany lamp on the side table, the writing desk by the window, the pocket watch in its display case. Walking through my house that evening, seeing all my treasures back in their places, I felt something I hadn't felt in months. Peace. They were just objects. I knew that. But they were also more than that. They were proof that I'd survived. That I'd built something beautiful out of loss and hardship. That I'd chosen meaning over convenience, history over haste, depth over surface sparkle. And they were mine, truly mine. Not because I'd inherited them or been given them, but because I'd earned them, protected them, valued them enough to fight for them. I poured myself a glass of wine and sat in my living room, surrounded by my ghosts, and I felt more at home than I had in years. Vivian tried to reach out several times over the next year. Emails, texts, voicemails, each one some variation of the same theme. She was sorry, she'd made a mistake. She wanted to fix things. Couldn't I just forgive her? I didn't respond. Not out of cruelty, but out of self-preservation. Because here's what I'd learned. Love without boundaries is just another word for being used. I'd loved Vivian without limits, without conditions, without protecting myself. And she'd taken everything I'd offered and still reached for more. I couldn't do it anymore. I couldn't be the inexhaustible well she drew from whenever she needed something. I couldn't be the safety net that let her make terrible choices without consequences. So I let her go. It was the hardest thing I'd ever done. Harder than losing Marcus. Harder than those early years of single parenthood. Harder than anything. But it was also the most honest thing I'd ever done. 1.5 years after the wedding, I got a call from a number I didn't recognize. Mom? I almost hung up. But something in her voice stopped me. She sounded different, smaller, scared. Vivian. I need to tell you something. I'm getting divorced. I waited. Derek and it didn't work. We tried. But there was always this thing between us, you know? This knowledge that our marriage started with a lie. That I'd lied to him about you, about the antiques, about how much money we really had. He could never trust me after that, and I couldn't blame him. I still said nothing. Mom, I'm so sorry. I know I've said it before, but I mean it now. I really mean it. I was so stupid, so selfish. I thought I knew what mattered, and I was so wrong. I threw away everything real for something that looked pretty, and now I have nothing. No marriage, no you. Nothing. You have yourself, I said quietly. That's not nothing. It feels like nothing. She was crying now. I miss you. I miss you so much. I know I don't deserve your forgiveness. I know I broke something that can't be fixed, but I wanted you to know that I understand now. What those antiques meant. What I took from you. I understand. Do you? I asked. Or do you just understand that there are consequences to your actions? I don't know, she admitted. Maybe both. Does it matter? Yes, I said. It matters enormously. There was a long silence. Can I see you? She asked finally. Not to ask for anything, not to try to fix things, just to see you, to sit with you, to tell you face to face that I'm sorry. Every instinct I had screamed at me to say no, to protect myself, to maintain the boundaries I'd fought so hard to establish. But she was still my daughter, and maybe, just maybe, she was finally growing up. One coffee, I said. That's all I'm promising. Okay, she whispered. Thank you. We met at a cafe downtown 2 weeks later. She looked older, thinner. There were dark circles under her eyes and new lines around her mouth. She looked like someone who'd learned a hard lesson. We ordered coffee and sat across from each other, and for a long moment, neither of us spoke. Your hair is longer, she said finally. Yours is shorter. Yeah, She touched it self-consciously. Derek liked it long. After we separated, I cut it. Felt like I needed to figure out who I was without trying to be what someone else wanted. I nodded. I understood that impulse. Mom, I don't know where to start. There's so much I want to say, and none of it feels like enough. Then don't try to say everything at once, I said. Just tell me one true thing. She looked down at her coffee. I was jealous. I blinked. Jealous? Of your collection. Of how much you loved those things. Of how you had this whole world that didn't need me or include me. After Dad died, it felt like you replaced him with antiques, with stories about dead people, and I wanted you to care about me and my life as much as you cared about the past. It was the most honest thing she'd ever said to me. So you destroyed what I loved to punish me for not loving you enough? No? Yes. I don't know. She looked up, and her eyes were red. I told myself I was doing it for the wedding, for my future, but the truth is, part of me wanted to hurt you, wanted you to feel what it was like to lose something precious. And then when I actually did it, when I saw your face, she closed her eyes. I've never hated myself more than I did in that moment, but I couldn't take it back, so I doubled down, made excuses, blamed you for being too sentimental, because admitting what I'd really done would have meant admitting what kind of person I'd become. I felt something loosen in my chest. Not forgiveness, not yet, but understanding. I wasn't replacing your father, I said quietly. I was surviving his loss. Those antiques were how I stayed connected to something larger than my grief. They reminded me that people had loved and lost before me, and they'd survived it, and I could too. And yes, maybe I did get lost in them sometimes. Maybe I did use them as an escape. But Vivian, you were never in competition with them. You were always the most important thing in my life. Were, she said softly. Past tense. I didn't correct her. What happened to them? She asked after a moment. The antiques. Do you know who bought them? This was it. The moment of truth. I could tell her, show her the receipts, explain that I'd outsmarted her, that I'd protected what was mine, that she'd failed even in her betrayal. I could make her feel small and stupid and outmaneuvered. But what would that accomplish? They're safe, I said simply. That's all that matters. She nodded slowly. I'm glad. I really am. You deserved better than what I did. We drank our coffee in silence for a while. I'm not ready to let you back in, I said finally. I don't know if I ever will be. What you did, it changed something fundamental between us. I don't trust you anymore, Vivian, and I don't know if I can learn to trust you again. I understand. But, I continued, I don't hate you. I don't wish you ill. I hope you figure out who you are and what you really want from life. I hope you build something real and meaningful. I hope you learn to value what matters. Can I call you? She asked. Sometimes? Not often. Just to let you know how I'm doing? I thought about it. Once a month. Email, not calls. I'm not ready for calls. Okay. She smiled a little. Once a month. I can do that. We stood to leave and she hesitated. Mom? Did you ever regret having me? The question was so vulnerable, so raw, that I felt my defenses crack just a little. Never, I said, and I meant it. Not even now. Not even after everything. You were the best thing that ever happened to me. You were my daughter, my heart, my reason for everything. The fact that you broke my trust doesn't change that you were loved. Completely. Unconditionally. Even when I was angry, even when I was grieving what you'd done, I never stopped loving you. She started crying then, really crying, and I let her. I didn't hug her, didn't comfort her. She needed to sit with this pain, to feel the weight of what she'd done and what it had cost. But I stayed. I didn't walk away. And maybe that was its own kind of grace. That was 2 years ago. Vivian emails me once a month, like clockwork. She tells me about her job, her therapy, her small apartment. She's working as a curator at a local history museum now. The irony isn't lost on either of us. She's learning, she says, to value what came before, to see objects as vessels of meaning, to understand that the past isn't something to discard, but something to learn from. I read her emails and I respond briefly. I'm cordial. Sometimes I'm even warm. But I maintain my boundaries. She's not invited to my home. She doesn't have a key. She's not in my will, except for a small trust that will pay out when she turns 50, assuming she's proven herself capable of managing it. Maybe that sounds cruel. Maybe it is. But I've learned that self-preservation isn't selfish. It's necessary. I've also learned that loving someone doesn't mean sacrificing yourself on the altar of their needs. Last month, I donated a portion of my collection to a museum. Not all of it. Just a few key pieces. The ones I think should be shared, should be preserved for future generations. The museum was honored. They're creating a special exhibit. Personal histories, how objects carry memory. My name will be on a plaque. Marcus's pocket watch will be in a glass case with a card explaining its journey. My grandmother's Tiffany lamp will illuminate a corner of the gallery. And people will see them, and maybe some of them will understand what I've always known, that we're all just temporary custodians of memory, that the things we love outlast us, that there's beauty in preservation, in honoring what came before, in refusing to let the past be erased in service of convenience. Vivian asked if she could come to the opening. I said yes. Not because I've forgiven her completely, not because everything is fixed, but because maybe, just maybe, she's earned the right to witness what her betrayal couldn't destroy. She's earned the right to see that I survived her, that I rebuilt, that I'm still here, still collecting, still honoring the continuum of human experience that stretches backward and forward through time. And maybe she needs to see that some things are worth more than money or weddings or fairy tales. Some things are priceless. The night of the museum opening, I stood in front of the exhibit wearing my best dress and my grandmother's pearls. The gallery was full of people admiring the pieces, reading the stories, understanding. Vivian arrived late. She stood at the edge of the room for a long time, just watching me. When our eyes met, she mouthed 2 words. Thank you. I nodded. Once. Enough. She didn't stay long, just walked through the exhibit slowly, reading every placard, studying every piece. When she got to her father's pocket watch, she stopped for a long time. I saw her touch the glass gently, reverently. Then she left without saying goodbye. But the next morning, I got an email. Mom, the exhibit was beautiful. You were beautiful. I'm so proud of who you are and what you've built. I know I'll never be part of your life the way I was before. I understand why. But I want you to know that I carry you with me every day. I'm trying to be someone worthy of being your daughter. I don't know if I'll ever get there, but I'm trying. I love you. I'm sorry. I'll keep trying. Love, Vivian. I read it 3 times. Then I wrote back. Keep trying. That's all any of us can do, Mom. I'm 62 now. I've lived more than half my life. I've loved and lost and survived and rebuilt. My collection has grown again. New pieces, new stories, new connections to the great continuum of human experience. My home is full of beauty and memory and meaning. And I'm alone, but I'm not lonely. Because I've learned the most important lesson of all. You cannot pour from an empty cup. You cannot love others if you don't protect what's sacred in yourself. You cannot sacrifice everything and expect anything to remain. Boundaries aren't walls. They're the lines that define where you end and others begin. They're how you preserve yourself while still engaging with the world. And preservation, as I've always known, is an act of love. My daughter sold my antique collection to pay for her wedding. But the buyer was me. And in the end, I didn't just buy back my possessions. I bought back my dignity, my self-respect, my right to say no and mean it. I bought back myself. And that, as it turns out, was the most valuable thing I ever owned.